We have tested these two cars alongside one another before, but not in their flagship specifications. We're really looking to see how this Toyota Prado tackles some pretty steep terrain. Bit of fun. It may come as no surprise that Australians are spoilt for choice when it comes to a one-size-fits-all solution to a large family SUV. Drive has typically been impressed by the Ford Everest. This Australian-designed and tested SUV has won category wins at our annual Drive Car of the Year awards 2 years back-to-back. But it now faces a new foe in the Toyota LandCruiser Prado. Make no mistake, this car's predecessor was really old, and the improvements that Toyota has made to the 5th generation product you see here are light years ahead. We have tested these two cars alongside one another before, but not in their flagship specifications. We are going to do a little bit of off-roading. These cars will probably do their best work driving on roads and touring. We're also going to dive throughout the interiors and see what they're like, and also find out how much each of these two cars cost to run. So at the very top of the tree, which large family SUV reigns supreme? Come with me and let's find out. Let's first start with a relatively new Toyota LandCruiser Prado. It was launched late in 2024 to widespread anticipation. The older Toyota Prado 150 series was going on 15 years old, albeit with updates, so the introduction of a new successor was big news. However, it came at a big price premium. The Toyota Prado in Kakadu guise, as we have it, now costs $99,990 plus on-road costs. It's a substantial $12,000 more than the old Toyota Prado and uses a version of the same engine. That said, with 48-volt mild hybrid assistance, it gets 20-inch alloy wheels wrapped in highway terrain tyres, a 12.3-inch infotainment system, Apple CarPlay and Android Auto smartphone mirroring, a power-operated tailgate, leather-accented upholstery, adaptive suspension, a 14-speaker JBL sound system, multi-terrain driving select modes, a refrigerated center console box, a Torsen rear LSD, panoramic sunroof, heated and ventilated seats in the first and second rows, a head-up display, and illuminated side steps. For a full rundown on specification, head over to the written review over at Drive.com.au. But suffice to say that this is the all-you-can-eat Toyota Prado. In terms of powertrain, the Toyota Prado Kakadu counts a 2.8-litre turbo diesel 4-cylinder engine under its bonnet. This outputs 150 kilowatts and 500 newton meters, backed up by the support of a 48-volt mild hybrid system and engine start-stop capability. It gets an 8-speed automatic gearbox and drives center all 4 wheels, all of the time. This also includes low-range gearing, and the capability to tow up to 3,500 kilograms. In the blue corner, or the black corner today, we have the Ford Everest Platinum. It's priced from $82,390 before on-road costs, so it's already just under $20,000 more affordable than the Toyota Prado Kakadu. But importantly, it doesn't miss out on much. Where the Toyota Prado uses a 2.8-litre 4-cylinder to motivate its weight, the Ford Everest Platinum comes with a 3-litre turbocharged 6-cylinder diesel engine for its 184 kilowatts and 600 newton meter outputs. These outputs are sent to all wheels through a part-time 4-wheel drive system with a 4x4 auto mode for on-demand all-wheel drive and a 10-speed transmission. It is enough to tow up to 3,500 kilograms braked. There are also several driving modes, a locking rear differential, underbody protection, off-road displays for the infotainment, and of course, a low-range transfer case for when the going gets rough. Reasons why you'd opt for this top-spec Platinum model grade includes its panoramic sunroof, matrix LED headlights, larger 12.3-inch digital instrument cluster, a 12-speaker Bang & Olufsen stereo, 21-inch wheels with highway tyres, quilted leather accent seats, and ambient lighting highlights for the cabin. It also benefits from things like a power tailgate and heated and cooled front seats. We have previously tested the Ford Everest Platinum up against an even more affordable GWM Tank 500, which proved a worthy adversary. This latest comparison with the Toyota Prado is the Everest's biggest threat yet. Don't forget, if you're in the market for a car like this, you can check out Drive Marketplace to view current examples of these cars for sale in your area. How these two cars present will be a subjective matter, so let us know in the comments below which one you're taking from a looks perspective. Obviously on the Prado we do have a big non-standard front bull bar that does hide its front fascia, but I think in the metal this is a pretty cool looking thing. I do like the retro FJ vibes in its styling, and overall I do think that this package is ripe for modification. As for the Ford, it is obviously a lot more of an American look. That is due to its use of chrome trim throughout the exterior. Personally, when it comes to design, as much as I do like this Ford Everest and its resolved design, I am taking the Toyota Prado on looks alone. I really do like that retro styling. Step inside the Toyota interior and you're immediately hit with a very utilitarian design. You've got big chunky door handles, a big steering wheel, a wide center console with a big shifter, and then there are also feelsome controls all around the driver. Plus, it's awesome to see a full suite of buttons to control all kinds of aspects, from the air conditioning all the way through to the four-wheel drive settings. This Prado Kakadu is kitted to the nines with all kinds of niceties. However, I am impressed by these seats that I'm sitting on. They do provide a nice, comfy seat base. There is plenty of adjustment. I've got a good tall perch and a good view out over the bonnet. And this definitely feels like the larger car from the driver's seat. However, I will say that even though it is large, it does feel pretty enclosed, particularly because of that wide center console. My knees and legroom, it is a little bit constrained. On the whole, this does feel like the bigger and more airy cabin thanks to that sunroof and the light upholstery in this tester. In terms of plush accents, I don't think this Prado goes as far as the Everest, which is a little bit of a shame at the top buying level. There are no design inlays for the dashboard, no quilted or contrast stitching, and then there is no ambient lighting like you do get in the Ford Everest. So while this does feel like the bigger car from the hot seat, it certainly doesn't feel like the nicer interior, even though it is light and airy. Infotainment is covered off by a big 12.3-inch screen on the dash running Toyota's latest software. It is quick enough. It has AM, FM, digital radio, plus native satellite navigation. You've got all kinds of controls along the right-hand side here, and you can change to things like wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. I think it is pretty easy to use. However, I don't think it is as visually impressive as what you get in the Ford Everest. It feels a little bit more like an off-the-shelf system that is proliferated throughout the Toyota model range, whereas the Ford feels a little bit more purpose-built. That said, I do like the way that you can change the Apple CarPlay between full and minimized screens, so you do have those shortcuts along the right-hand side there. At this Kakadu specification level, you do get a big 12.3-inch screen, the same size as the infotainment, but in front of the driver, and that is hugely configurable as well. So you've got different gauges on the right and left sides that you can configure with all kinds of things like off-road angles, fuel data, speed information, and maps. In reality, it does take a little bit of time to get your head around in terms of the level of configuration that you do get. However, it is nice to have all that information available to the driver. One other thing you are getting in this Toyota Prado over and above the Ford Everest is a head-up display. Slide on into the second row, and this remains a very comfortable car. However, I do feel like I am sat quite low and my knees, they are perched weirdly in the air, so I wish there was a little bit more under thigh support for taller people like me. I'm 194 centimeters tall. In the backseat of this car, I've got a decent amount of space for my knees behind my own driving position, decent headroom for my head, and I feel like my feet are a little bit constrained in these big boots I've got on, but overall the spaciousness on offer in the second row of the Prado here is pretty impressive. You've got heated and ventilated outboard seats, tri-zone climate control, twin USB ports, a 12-volt point, map pockets, and a nice little LandCruiser insignia behind the center console, plus an armrest with cup holders. While there is good vision through the low windows and a nice light afforded by that huge sunroof, the Prado comes with a clumsy fold and flip forward action to accessing the third row. Not the best choice for a family SUV. It is a tight space once you're in the third row, and it is a shame that there is limited adjusting of the second row to accommodate extra space. There are a couple cup holders, air vents, and USB ports for charging devices, however. As for which one comes with the greatest storage capacity, this is where the Prado comes with the greatest compromise. I do like the fact that it does get a split tailgate, but once you open the boot fully, you will see that there is some serious packaging constraints with this car. That third row back there, it doesn't fold flat because it does have to make way for that 48-volt battery. And Toyota, to make a flat loading floor, it has gone with this flimsy sort of solution. It does feel like an afterthought. Overall storage volume stands at 182 litres to the third row, 906 litres to the second row, and a full 1829 litres to the first row in the Toyota Prado. Things are a lot better in the Ford Everest. It also does come with a power opening tailgate, and that paves way to a substantial sized space. The Everest power-operated boot is easily opened and reveals a 259-litre space behind the third row, 898 litres behind the second row, and up to 1,818 litres with all seats down. Ford has also given us some power-operated third rows. That is really handy when you have kids, and you even get a little bit of underfloor storage. So while it is pretty line ball in terms of on-paper figures in terms of storage, this is the far better boot to use. The Everest cabin makes its portrait-mounted central screen much more of a centerpiece than is found in the Toyota. More of the car is controlled through the screen. Now that could be a good thing or a bad thing depending on personal preference, but I think Ford has done the controls in a smart way. I like the fact that they've stuck with dials for the volume, dials for the air conditioning system. I think it's all really integrated quite well and really helps out that user experience. Whereas some other manufacturers, they have stuck with sliders and touch-based controls for those kinds of things. In any case, there is a bunch of space to get comfortable with, and soft touch materials are plenty. The seats offer more bolster support compared to the Toyota LandCruiser Prado, and it matches its ventilation, electric adjustment, and heating capabilities. There is a little bit more visual flair going on with the platinum badging, contrast stitching, and neat stitching for the upholstery inlays. Though both cars get soft touch panels on the doors, it's the Fords that feel more upmarket. As with the Prado, buttons are found around the center console to change the 4x4 system and a drive mode selector, but there aren't nearly as many buttons. The center console space also houses a lidded storage bin, wireless smartphone charger, 2 cup holders, a handy slot underneath the dash for stowing keys, and a 2-tier glove box in front of the passenger. We have said it plenty of times before, but we really do love the integration of this Ford Sync 4 software in this portrait-oriented screen. It's quickly become one of the better offerings on the market, let alone for a large off-road SUV. Obviously here on the screen you can see wireless Apple CarPlay running right now, but it has a bunch of embedded features as well. You've got digital radio that you can connect to. You can also have things like native satellite navigation. There are clear cameras with this car, and then there are also some pretty handy sort of off-road specific displays that the driver can use as well. There really is a whole lot of functionality within this system. I think it's better than the Prado because it just feels a little bit more specific to this car. However, your mileage may vary. Now, in front of the driver, we do have a big 12.4-inch display. So that displays things like your speed. It also shows off-road gauges, and it is quite configurable as well. Even though this car doesn't have a head-up display, there is a bright amount of information viewed through this screen. There are clear, crisp graphics and great colors. Clamber into the second row, and it is pretty easy to sort of appreciate the level of space on offer here. I think it is quite similar to the Prado in terms of actual spaciousness, but my head is a little bit constrained by this headlining and my knees are a little bit tight, but there is great footroom for my feet. The seats slide on rails and the backrests recline too, so it's a very configurable space. The 2 outboard seats have heating, and there are bottle holders in the door pockets as well as cup holders in the fold-down armrest. There are air vents in the second row, and the panoramic sunroof allows plenty of light to brighten the black leather accent upholstery. Getting into the third row is far easier because it's a simple pull and slide forward. There is no time wasted watching the seat contort itself. It feels marginally bigger than the Prado, primarily because you can move that second row a bit more generously. There are air vents and cup holders to keep rear seat occupants happy in the third row. Toyota and Ford both offer 5-year unlimited kilometre warranties, but Ford accompanies its warranty with up to 7 years of roadside assistance, whereas Toyota charges $99 per year to subscribe to its service. The Toyota is far more expensive to service, and it needs to visit the dealership once every 6 months or 10,000 kilometres. Comparatively, the Ford only requires annual maintenance or once you've reached 15,000 kilometres, whichever is first. The Ford Everest servicing is capped at $379 per visit, and the Toyota Prado maintenance schedule costs $390 per visit, though you will have to visit twice as often as you would with the Ford. Then comes fuel economy. We saw 9.2 litres per 100 kilometres on the Toyota's trip computer compared to a 7.6 litre per 100 kilometre claim. It's clear that the 48-volt mild hybrid system is not as efficient as Toyota would have you believe. The Ford used 10.7 litres per 100 kilometres against a rating of 8.5. Out here in the Ford Everest now, and this is a really nice car to drive in outer urban areas. Underpinned by that 3-litre turbo diesel V6 engine, it is a really handy thing to have in this car. 184 kilowatts and 600 newton meters. That absolutely blows the Toyota LandCruiser Prado out of the water. One thing I've come to love in this Ford Everest as well is this is a little bit more refined. I'm finding that there's not nearly as much vibrations coming through from the engine, and there's also not that much noise coming into the cabin compared to that diesel unit in the Prado. The steering efforts in this thing, they are light, possibly lighter than the Prado, and it doesn't feel overly vague or anything, but you just don't get probably as much feedback from the steering wheel as you would get in the Toyota Prado. But on the flip side, this makes it a very easy thing to maneuver in town. Mated to that 3-litre turbo diesel V6 engine is a 10-speed automatic transmission, and we have had some complaints with this transmission in the past. It's probably not the most refined pairing for that diesel V6. It arguably sometimes doesn't know at what shift points to change and sometimes gets the gear wrong. So when you are going uphill or you are going up some particularly demanding terrain, there are certain scenarios in which this transmission can get it wrong, and it is a little bit frustrating, but it's certainly not a deal breaker. It's probably just one of those things that you will come to terms with as you sort of get familiar with the car. Unlike the Toyota Prado, this is a part-time 4-wheel drive system, so you can drive it on 2-wheel drive. But the handy thing with this thing is you can drive the 4-wheel drive system on sealed surfaces once you put it in that 4 auto mode using this dial down here on the center console. You can cycle between 4 high, 4 low, 2 high, and then you get to a 4 auto mode, which we are in at the moment. And you don't really have that worry of the system stuffing up when you are on sealed surfaces. Discarding the fact that this car sits on a set of 21-inch wheels, which are pretty big in this Platinum specification, it is a really nice car in terms of ride comfort. It is really sort of just pummeling through road imperfections. It doesn't get upset by potholes all too much. It doesn't have adaptive dampers like that Toyota Prado, but on the whole, the ride comfort in this Ford Everest is nicely balanced. Here we are in the Toyota Prado out on the open road where this thing will probably spend a lot more of its time. Now the Toyota Prado, it is powered by a 2.8-litre 4-cylinder turbo diesel engine, and that is a carryover from its predecessor. So you're still getting that same engine under the bonnet. However, these days it does have 48-volt mild hybrid assistance, and that comes with an integrated start-stop generator. Now it doesn't do a whole lot for fuel economy, and the output boost it does give is very negligible. At the moment we're doing about 9.1 litres per 100 kilometres, and you do have to make concessions in terms of the boot, as we discovered earlier. But it feels like it's a little bit more gruff, a little bit more rough around the engines. You can hear a lot more vibrations coming from the engine bay, and you hear a lot more noise as well. So I've been driving this car around town, and passengers have remarked that it sounds like a very loud thing. So it does seem like that engine is working a little bit harder, and it probably is, because it is down on outputs. This car outputs 150 kilowatts and 500 newton meters, which is a lot down on the Ford Everest. When it comes to ride comfort, this Toyota Prado, it is fitted with adaptive dampers, so as soon as you sort of start diving into the driving settings and driving modes, you can change up that system, but from a base level, this is a little bit more jittery than the Ford Everest. We are out on a country road at the moment, and I'm finding that it does get jumbled around inside the cabin, and even my passengers before were saying that this isn't the most refined car when it comes to open road touring. So it is one of those things to keep in mind, and also it does get bullied around by things like speed humps. You really have to take them at a bit more of a slow clip compared to the Ford Everest. It just doesn't absorb them as well. One thing that is better than the Ford Everest is the 8-speed torque converter automatic transmission. You don't have any sort of worry that this transmission is going to choose the wrong gear at the wrong time. It sort of just melds with the driver in a really nice and refined way. In terms of handling and steering, it is a light steering weight that you do get from this Toyota Prado, much like the Everest. However, I am finding that this does feel like the heavier car to thread through a set of bends. This is marginally more heavy. It's about 2.6 tons in total curb weight. So when it does come to going around corners, the Everest does feel a whole lot more resolved, and you don't really get that feel of having to slow down nearly as much. Another thing I do quite like though is the fact that there is a lot of button switchgear around the driver. Everything is at arm's reach, and there are a whole lot of specific buttons for controlling that four-wheel drive system. So you've got things like the multi-terrain select mode, the crawl mode, you've got drive mode selectors, locking differentials, and then obviously traction control buttons and the switch from 4 high to 4 low. Keep in mind that this is a full-time four-wheel drive system compared to the Everest part-time system, so you are sending power to all four wheels at the same time in this car compared to the Ford, which is a variable system. In summary, I do believe that perhaps it's the Ford Everest that is the better suited to more domains compared to this Toyota Prado. Don't get me wrong, this Toyota Prado, it does feel nice and comfortable out here on the open road, but when it does come to around town, it's just not as refined and you don't have the best powertrain pairing. So in that regard, I do think it's the Ford Everest that fares better on sealed bitumen. We're threading the Ford Everest through some off-road trails at the moment, and it doesn't feel like the best suitor to this sort of tight and tricky terrain. This thing, it is on 21-inch wheels, don't forget, but I'm finding it's nice and supple around bends, and you do have decent sort of articulation of the wheels when you are going over sort of moguls and that sort of thing. One thing I really do like about the Everest is this camera display on the infotainment screen. You can see a great view of what the car's up to at any given point, and you get great visibility. Just about to go through a bit of a puddle now, see how it tackles this. Bit of fun. Well, this Everest, it does come with a rear locking differential. Obviously, you do have the dial that can sift through a number of modes. You've got mud, ruts, sand, that sort of thing. But overall, it's probably not as well kitted for off-road use as the Toyota Prado in its Kakadu specification. You're not getting things like a center locking differential. You don't get that kind of trick Toyota software with the crawl control or the multi-terrain systems and the extensiveness of that. But yeah, it just feels like this is not the best suitor to this kind of terrain on the whole. You really do want something as dedicated as the Toyota Prado for heading off on some particularly rough terrain. There is so much more configuration and so much more setup for that kind of hardcore off-roading, even in its Kakadu model grade. Getting set up for off-roading in this Toyota Prado is a whole lot easier in this car as compared to the Ford Everest, and that's simply because of the fact that Toyota has gone with a whole bunch of buttons and dials for changing this car's systems, and that is really easy to use on the fly. So down here on the center console, you've got drive mode selectors, multi-terrain select, and at the moment I've put it in multi-terrain select and then put it in dirt for this sort of off-road trail that we're tackling at the moment, and the car basically just does everything else for you. If you really want, you can engage the center locking differential, which this car gets over and above the Ford Everest, but for the kind of terrain that we're throwing at these two cars today, I don't think it's strictly necessary. Now don't forget that this car, it does come with a full-time four-wheel drive system, so as we are tackling a bit of a big puddle right now, you don't have that much of a worry of getting stuck going through a big puddle. But as we come up the other side now through this big hill, we're really looking to see how this Toyota Prado tackles some pretty steep terrain, and it's doing quite well on getting up this hill without much of a struggle whatsoever. Keep in mind that this car, it is fitted with 20-inch wheels and highway terrain tires, so this certainly isn't the off-road specification that you do want if you are going off the beaten track regularly. But yeah, this thing, it's doing pretty well just from the outset. Vision plays a huge part of off-roading, and I want to see where my wheels are at and what the body is doing at any given point. And the fact that this Toyota, it does come with, like the Ford Everest, some pretty decent camera gear, that is so helpful when you are on this kind of tricky terrain. While none of these two cars have really struggled with the sort of terrain that we've thrown at them today, it does feel like the Toyota Prado is that much better set up for off-road use. And conversely, it is the Ford Everest that fares better when it does come to on-road comfort and refinement. So it is a little bit sort of choose your own adventure depending on what you are going to use these two cars for, but let's go and sum up. From the outset, this Toyota Prado here in its flagship Kakadu specification, it did have more hurdles to overcome in declaring victory over that Ford Everest Platinum. And don't get me wrong, when we are out here in the open country on the rough stuff, that is the car that you want to be piloting. However, on balance, it is the Ford Everest Platinum that is the better all-round car here. And that is the lens that we have to view this comparison through. Which one of these two cars is the better car on a wider variety of scenarios? Not only is it a substantially more affordable car from the outset, it's cheaper to service, the engine is much more powerful. You also do get a nice interior in that thing, even though it does feel a little bit more cramped and it is a little bit darker. It does feel like a really, really nice thing in that Platinum flagship specification, and you don't want for any extra features or equipment. The Toyota Prado, it is a very impressive car, but by God, it is quite expensive, and especially when it is basically carrying over the predecessor's powertrain, albeit with a 48-volt system that actually doesn't do too much in the way of efficiency or providing power benefits. So that is why on this occasion, it is the Ford Everest Platinum that is a better all-round car in my opinion. If you want to see even more of this Toyota Prado in action, you can check out my colleague Sam's review of the Toyota Prado Altitude. That is the off-road focused variant in the range, and he really puts this thing through its paces. Go and check out the video above me right now.